Good morning, all of my Resolume friends. This is the Turing Test Part 2. Some things that I've been tinkering with and just trying to figure out how I want to set up this patch. So there's a couple things here that I really like. One of them is this masked image. So basically, if you have a silhouette of a picture, so I have this skull, you can create this Turing pattern by basically just adding some static to that image and then creating the Turing pattern from that static mask. So if I decrease the static, you'll see that it changes the pattern of the Turing pattern on the skull. There's some things here that we can play with that will change it as well. Like this increases the pixel size of the Turing pattern. So then I can increase it and decrease it. I have the option to increase and decrease the Turing balance. This basically controls how quickly or how much the Turing pattern affects the object. So this is the reverb basically, because a Turing pattern is basically, in this case, is a Gaussian blur and a sharpen being recursively, what do they call that? You're putting it in on itself. And so it's constantly reverberating and it's causing this pattern to start to show. So there are some options here to change the way in which the Gaussian blur is affected. So for instance, I have just the blur, and then I also have the Gaussian blur, which can give you different results. It can thicken or thin the lines out and make it so you have this like very interesting pattern that starts to show up. So I really started liking how this was starting to come together, and so this is the result of this. So this is just me tinkering around, showing you some of the things that it can do. So aside from that, if I go in here, I have the static. I can add more static in, which will basically create more of an outline in that specific spot. As you'll notice, however, there are bigger spaces, but then the little spaces, there's not as many. And the reason being is because the Turing pattern was already pre-created. And so it already has kind of mapped those areas out. So to kind of fix that, you could basically just turn off your Turing balance and then come back in. And when you do, you'll get a different pattern, as you can see. So that's kind of how that works. You have the option to move it left and right, and it'll regenerate, and with some artifacting, of course. Because it is a Turing pattern, it's leaving some of that extra. Once again, you can just remove that by just turning your pixelization size, or excuse me, you're turning your Turing balance back down and then turning it back up. And when you do that, it recreates that Turing pattern and gets rid of the excess. So some of the things that you can do is you can decrease your blur size and then also decrease the sharpening distance or increase the sharpening distance. And that will help to resize the Turing pattern. So once again, turn off the Turing. I think I'm gonna make an option to basically make it 0 and then put it back what it was. I think that would be a very useful tool, so that way you can restructure your Turing pattern. However, right at this moment, this is where I'm at with that. We'll keep moving forward. So I can turn this off. You'll notice that when I add the static or turn off the masked opacity, the Turing pattern is still kind of there, even though I've turned it all the way to 0. And again, same kind of thing as before, the Turing balance needs to be reset. So there's some other little options. I have this gradation opacity. What will happen here is it'll do like a wave of Turing. So as this increases, let's just get this wiped up here real quick. Okay. And if I bring this back down, you'll notice it'll start to make this wave pattern. So I have it set to radial right at this moment, but of course there's a vertical, there's a horizontal, and there's the angular, which is the one that rotates. And you can change once again, the Turing pattern by just increasing your Gaussian, and also increasing your sharpen distance, right? And as you increase the sharpening distance, you get different patterns. So the Gaussian blur and the sharpen distance are the things that create those patterns. So if I increase this to the nth degree, it'll create like straight lines. And then if I increase the Gaussian, you'll notice that the lines get bigger and bigger. But you'll also notice that it interacts differently depending on how much what's on the space, right? So you get all kinds of different really cool effects by basically just filtering or fiddling with the Gaussian blur. It really does some really amazing things. I'm really kind of enthralled by this, or enamored by the look and feel of this. So in any case, there's the gradient opacity or gradations, as you can see, the horizontal and the vertical and the radial. And then I also have this fractal opacity, which is this one. Fractal is creating, it's using a fractal noise to create the same kind of thing, like you give it a different kind of pattern. There's an option for jitter to kind of jitter the edges, right? I thought that could be visually interesting, and there's cases where this could also be like, as you get more into like sharpening the edges, it really kind of acts really differently in certain cases. And I thought that was kind of cool. I thought that really had some really interesting kind of look. But also, let's go back to the fractal controls, and I can increase the fractal controls, and so now you get this kind of amoeba look, right? But you can take off the jitter, and then you could add some noise speed, which will basically recycle the pattern. So if I take down my noise density, you'll notice that it's cycling through. And there's a noise moving up and down, right? So I can change this to 0, so it's not moving up and down or down the screen. And now it's cycling through its Z formation, right? And then you could do moving it up. And then this could also be used as a mask. That was the thing that I was interested in. So for instance, if I'll turn this one on, and I'll turn these two on, you'll notice that here I have cycled, I have it set as an alpha mask on that layer that's affecting the layer below. And so now you have this cycling effect, right? And this is interesting because you could have a texture on top, and then, or let me think about that. There's a way you can set this up so that you could have one affecting the other. One of the things you could do is set a mask for this one. Oh, I know why, because I need to set this one to the bottom. That was it. So then if I turn this one on, there we go. So now you have this cycled effect, right? So that could be visually interesting. It sets for all kinds of different, options. This is a real nice basis or basic setup for all kinds of different effects. So I'm going to turn off all my other layers and go to the next little example here. Here I have an image as just the 3 diamonds, and there's all kinds of options that you could finagle with to make all kinds of interesting setups. There's also a static control. Static control is just basically straight static, right? You also have the option to trigger it, so you can change the randomization of it. You also have the option for metronome, so that it automatically metronomes to a specific timing. And I need to set the metronome timing in here, so you can change that if you want to. I also put in some other Turing effects that are after all of the other effects. So the noise, the fractal, the gradient, and the mask are on one side, and then there are these options which are like the fisheye, the suck, right? It sucks in the Turing, and then the fisheye, blows out. And then there's this scale out, which is different from the fisheye. It's a little bit different. So if I turn down the fisheye and I turn up the scale out, you'll notice that it moves the edges out in a different way. I need to change that because I can tell that it needs to be affected a little bit more. So there's something for me to fix, or something extra for me to fix. Then there's also the rotation. So you really, the rotation is not being seen. Let me turn that down. Okay, so you can kind of see it here in the mask. It's happening. Let's take off the trigger, and then I'm going to move down the balance and move down the pixel size. That should be rotating 360 degrees. Interesting. Okay, so I must have broke something. Okay, so I'll figure that out. It will rotate the pattern out. So your pixel size is basically the size of the pixels behind the scenes. So as you decrease the pixelate size, it makes the squares bigger that are actually used to create the Turing pattern, right? So if I move this all the way down, you'll notice that there's these big large squares here. Even though you're getting a smaller Turing pattern on the inside, there's actually, this is what it looks like, right? So as the pattern fills out, it fills out differently, right? So we get, if I turn my blur down, I get like more like straight edges, and if I turn the blur up, I get more rounded, curved edges. And then I could move up the sharpen, and I can move up the Gaussian, and so you can get some really interesting effects, right? So I could pull back the pixelate and then move this back in, and so now it's kind of replacing what's already there. You're not really seeing the diamonds as much, and the reason why is because the pixelate size is too big, right? So if I move that down and then just reset that and let that move, I'll get a different pattern every time. So I think this has got some really interesting effects. I really like how it's like it's drawing itself out, and that it's random. It's not the same pattern every single time. You can get some really interesting effects with this by just adjusting your sliders. So that's where I'm at right at this moment. If you're interested in what you see here, let me know. I'd really like to see what you guys think of this, this contour or this Turing pattern being used in this way. This was just another shape, and I basically resized the areas so that the Turing is still affecting the masked shape, but then it's also bleeding into that, and it's recreating it every time. I think it's that's a wild idea. So, and the other thing is, like, you could set the blur a little higher. One of the things that I need to figure out is I've noticed that controlling the Turing sometimes can be challenging, and I'm concerned that would be too difficult for understanding. Like, there may be cases where it might be too hard to understand what sliders do what, and so I've been trying my hardest to break that down so that it's more user friendly. So that's behind the scenes. That's more my problem, trying to figure out how to make that work. But tell me what you think. I really would like to hear what you guys think about this. This is possibly my next patch is what I'm thinking. So I'm planning on putting this out on Juice Bar. I've been really liking where this is going, and I'm just going to continue to work on this. My next idea is to actually make maybe 2 contouring patterns so that the mask is separated. The shape mask is separated from the rest, and then changing the colors of the 2. Also, I added in, speaking of color, I added in the inverse, right? So you can change it inversely quickly, but it also has the option for color 1, color 2, right? The color 2 is set to, the color 2 is a transparent, right? So if I put something behind it, it bleeds through, right? So that is one of the nice little things about that, right? So you could go to HSB and crank that up so that you get just a little bit of showing through. You could change the color, and you could, still have that effect where something is being seen through that, but then it shows a little bit of that color. So yeah, there's lots of different ways you could play with this. I've been really enjoying this one. All right, well, that's the end of the video. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Thanks. Bye-bye.